Good morning. This is Sarah Glidden, Program Manager for the Cultural Investment Portfolio. I'm here with my fellow Program Manager, Michael Ibrahim, and we are here today to talk to you about the Gateway and Projects programs, both of which are accepting applications in this fiscal year. We're going to take questions at the end, but if you have questions as you go along, type them into the chat box. Once I've finished the presentation, we'll go back and we'll review all of the questions and work through them. If you have questions that are really specific just about your particular project or organization, I encourage you just to reach out to me personally, phone call or email. I'm happy to work with you to answer questions. In this context, we'd like to try to keep the questions relevant to the program as a whole. So again, this is our cultural investment portfolio, and our new logo you see there in the lower right-hand corner. And here's today's agenda. We're going to be talking about the cultural investment portfolio and specifically the Gateway program and the Projects program, both eligibility and the application and review process. These are two of the three elements of our cultural investment portfolio, which is the Mass Cultural Council's organizational support program. So this is support to organizations as opposed to our support to educational institutions, support to individual artists, support of local cultural councils, etc. Rather than having a very traditional granting program where all organizations had to apply every couple of years and go through a review process, about 10 years ago, we took this program and created something new called the Cultural Investment Portfolio. What we decided was that because we had been supporting a particular cohort of organizations for a very long-term and consistent history of funding, we were no longer going to make them continue to reapply. Instead, we have an ongoing commitment to those organizations that we will fund them, and their funding amount is based on their budget size. Currently, there are 310 organizations that are in this program. We fund them with grants ranging from $3,800 to $56,500, and as long as they stay eligible and continue to meet their annual requirements and this program exists, we will continue to fund them. That's all great if you're one of the organizations that has that long-term and consistent history of funding, but if you're not, 2 years ago, we created the Gateway program, which is for organizations to move into the portfolio. For some of you, you might have been funded by our old Peers program. Peers was discontinued after fiscal 16 and split into two separate programs, Gateway and Projects. Gateway program, currently we have 17 organizations that are Gateway grantees. They receive $3,000 per year for 2 years. And if they reach a consistent and long-term history of funding in the Gateway program, the possibility of moving into the portfolio. We also have 65 project grantees. Those organizations are getting one-year grants of $2,500. And we funded approximately $4.5 million in fiscal 18 in these three programs altogether. Here's our timeline, and I'm going to repeat a couple of things a few times because I really want to make sure they're clear. First of all, the Gateway application is available right now. If you log in to our online platform for submitting applications, you will see the Gateway intent to apply. It's a rolling intent to apply, so you can do it at any time. You can do it right up until the application deadline, although I don't encourage that. It does say January 15th, but that's truly just for help to us to understand how many applications we are likely to be receiving. But you can do that intent to apply right now. The moment you have completed the intent to apply, you can then access the full application. The application is due February 1st of 2018 at 11:59 and 59 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. At midnight, the entire system shuts down, and there is no flexibility in that at all. It's a computerized system, and when midnight hits, it will shut down and kick you out. The project's application will not be available until February 1st. We're trying to avoid any kind of confusion between the two programs, and we certainly don't want folks to have applied only to projects thinking that they have covered the gateway application. So on February 1st, the project's application becomes available. There's no intent to apply required for that, and the application for that program is due May 1st of 2018, again at 11:59 and 59 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. The organizations that apply to the Gateway program will receive a visit from a review panelist accompanied by a Mass Cultural Council staff member, and those visits will be for in-depth conversations about your organization, your programming, your organizational structure, your finances, and your long-term planning. Those meetings, combined with your written application and supporting documentation, will all feed into the panel process and the review and scoring. The panels for both Gateway and project grants will meet in June of 2018, so we will finish that month with a list of our organizations ranked by score. We will submit a list of our funding proposals to our governing council in the month of August. That, of course, all depends on the state budget process. This past year, that was delayed quite a bit, and we weren't able to actually release information about grants until the beginning of October. But typically, once the council approves our funding recommendations, we can make announcements to the applicants, and that is typically the very end of August or the very beginning of September. At that point, contracts get mailed, and if you received a grant, you can complete your contract, mail it back into us, and payment happens in full at the beginning once you have submitted your contract. So unlike many of the local cultural council grants where you have to submit receipts and wait for reimbursement, this is a grant which is funded upfront. If you are fortunate enough to get a grant, there are requirements of you. First of all, we expect that you will engage in advocacy activities on behalf of the sector. Those are activities where you are engaging with people who have the power to influence the state budget process. So your state rep, your state senator, the governor, the lieutenant governor, their offices, their administrative staff, folks who will be playing a role in the state budget. So however much you might love your congressional representative or your senators, they are not folks who have this role. Neither are your city council or mayors. We expect, and you need one of those if you're a project grantee, two of them if you're a gateway grantee, and you will receive in your contract information on how to complete this, and we will guide you in the process. Secondly, we expect you to publicly acknowledge Mass Cultural Council funding. My slide here has a picture of one of our project grantees, and there's our old logo, big and in the middle of their lovely banner there. As I mentioned, we have a new logo, so that'll be replacing that. You will have to submit a final report if you're a project grantee and an annual report if you are a gateway grantee. We require that you match this grant one-to-one with funds from non-state sources. So you cannot match this grant with local cultural council funds, with mass humanities funds, with state contract funds. It has to be from other sources, but those other sources can be just about anything. This isn't really an issue for the gateway grantees because since you have to have a minimum cash budget of $50,000, obviously you have more than matched the $3,000 that we're providing to you. If you're a project grantee, it might be a little more problematic, but that is a requirement. And if you're a gateway grantee, you have to complete the cultural data profile annually. And I'm going to get into that in a little more detail in just a minute or two. So the gateway program. Program number one that we're going to be talking about today. This is designed to be the gateway into the ongoing portfolio funding. It is a highly competitive program. This past application cycle, which was the first application cycle, we reviewed 83 applications and we funded 17 organizations. So approximately 20% of the applications were funded. The grant in this program is unrestricted operating support. You can use that to pay whatever bill you need to pay. It's $3,000 per year for 2 years for a total of $6,000. This is, of course, always contingent on what happens to the Mass Cultural Council's budget in the state budget process. This program accepts applications every other year, so 2018, 2020, 2022, etc. And as I've mentioned before, it holds the possibility of being reclassified into the portfolio. That's the name we have given to the process of being moved from one granting program to another. Who can apply? Two kinds of organizations can apply to the Gateway program. First of all, fully cultural 501c3 organizations registered in Massachusetts, or cultural affiliates. These are programs, quasi-organizations that exist within a parent organization. I'm going to go into a little more detail on both of these. So first of all, what is fully cultural? By this, we mean an organization whose primary mission serves to promote access, excellence, diversity, or education in the arts, humanities, or interpretive sciences. Interpretive sciences, we mean organizations that are working to interpret the natural world for the greater public. So zoos, aquariums, botanical gardens, watershed associations, other programs of that sort, environmental education programs. We have quite a few of those that we fund in our existing portfolio. We'll review your application. If we have any concerns, we will send it to the panel and they will participate in reviewing your mission to determine eligibility. It's pretty unusual, but it does happen occasionally. And then what's a cultural affiliate? Well, we have a variety of organizations in our portfolio that exists within parent organizations. Most of these are colleges and universities. For example, literary magazines or art museums that exist within colleges. But we also accept applications from organizations such as social service organizations that are using arts and culture to work with their populations. We also fund programs that exist within government organizations such as federal, state, or local municipal governments that are doing local cultural programming. So a few of our local cultural councils also do their own cultural programming in addition to their re-granting activities. And because they do their own programming, they are eligible to apply to these programs. If you're a cultural affiliate, you have to meet all of the eligibility requirements of the Gateway program 501c3 organizations, plus a few additional requirements. What are those eligibility requirements? Okay, so first of all, you have to have $50,000 in cash expenses for each of the last 2 completed fiscal years. So in-kind does not count towards this requirement. This is cash that has gone through your bank account, through your tax reporting. You have to have a minimum of 2 years of programming in Massachusetts. You have to have year-round operations. And we do make it clear that does not mean year-round programming, but there is an organization that exists year-round to be dealing with programmatic and operational activities. We have a lot of organizations that only program in the summer or only program in the fall, winter, spring. That certainly is okay as long as there's an organization that exists year-round. You must maintain your eligibility throughout the grant period. So if in the second year of a Gateway grant you drop below $50,000 of cash expenses, or you lose your 501c3 status, you will not be eligible for the Gateway program anymore. And in this program, we do not accept applications from organizations that are working with fiscal agents or fiscal sponsors. You do have to have your own 501c3 status or a parent organization that has its own 501c3 status, or as a government entity. If you're a cultural affiliate, a few additional requirements. First of all, within the parameters of your parent organization, you must manage your own budget. You must have at least one full-time paid staff person dedicated solely to the operation of the cultural entity. And you must have your own advisory board that meets regularly to discuss policy, strategic direction, and resource development plans to ensure long-term sustainability. This advisory board acts much like a fiduciary board, but does not have the fiduciary responsibilities that a traditional 501c3 board has. So how do you apply to this program? First of all, we have full guidelines for the entire cultural investment portfolio on our website. It's approximately 30 pages of riveting reading. We've really tried to foresee any kind of issue that might come up for one of our organizations in this granting program and define what the process is for how that will be dealt with. I do encourage you to take a moment to look at the full guidelines and specifically the portions relating to the program that you are looking to apply to. If you're applying to the Gateway program, there are 2 separate online platforms that you have to complete to apply to this program, and both parts are due no later than 11:59 p.m. on February 1st. The first part is on mass.gosmart.org, and that includes an application narrative, your current year budget, and some attachments. That's where you will find that rolling intent to apply that I previously mentioned. Secondly, you have to complete the Cultural Data Profile, which is a program of data arts, and you can find that on culturaldata.org. The Cultural Data Profile is a little bit like doing your tax return, like a 1040 long form with lots of additional schedules. It's a fairly detailed program to report all of your financial activities, your programmatic activities, your staffing, a lot of information that will be really useful to our panelists in reviewing your application. So that Cultural Data Profile, you only have to submit 1 year of Cultural Data Profile information for this application. It is your last completed fiscal year. So if you are audited, you need to wait until your audit is complete. If your fiscal 17 audit is not going to be complete in time for you to report for February 1st, you should go back and look at your fiscal 16 audit. And then just be prepared to talk about your fiscal 17 as well in your site visit. You're going to need to, just like doing your tax returns, you need to collect a lot of paperwork before you sit down and get this started. Your audit, your profit and loss statement, payroll records, other financial documentation, information about your donors. In aggregate, we're not looking for names or addresses of individual donors, but we are looking for you to report how many board members contribute, how many individuals, what kind of corporate support, how many foundations, etc. You'll need to provide staffing information such as full-time, part-time, contractors, and volunteers, and programmatic information such as the number and type of events that you do. So if you're doing this program for the first time, you're going to log in at culturaldata.org, and you're going to be confronted with a set of questions about your organization and the types of financial activities that you have. The process here is that the program will eliminate questions that don't relate to the kind of work or type of organization you are. For example, if you don't own a facility, you will not get questions about facility ownership. If you don't have an endowment, you won't get questions about endowment management. Again, this is just a reminder, this is a completely separate program from the GoSmart narrative section. It will have a different login name, a separate password. And if you are applying to this program, maybe you've done the Cultural Data Profile before, if you've also applied to either Gateway or if you have applied to the Cultural Facilities Fund. So once you've entered the information into the Cultural Data Profile, first of all, we urge you to carefully review the information that you've entered. When you run a report, take a good look at it. See if it makes sense. There's always a possibility that you might have entered information into a category where it doesn't really make sense, particularly if you have multiple years of information in this system and you see that the numbers swing wildly from one year to the next. You probably want to go back into the Cultural Data Profile and make some edits so that you're providing a consistent financial story. Once you've been satisfied with the quality of the information that you have put into the data profile, you need to run a funder report. And what that means is you're going to choose the Mass Cultural Council as the organization you're applying to. You're going to identify the program that you are applying to, which is called Gateway Applicants for Cycle 2 FY19/20. And then you will click on the links to generate a funder report. That's the process that actually makes your data available to us to review as part of this application. If you complete all the information, but you haven't run the funder report, then you have not completed the process of applying. It's exactly the same as if you wrote all of your application narrative and didn't hit submit, so we never see it. This will trip you up if you're applying to the Gateway program. You do have to complete and submit that funder report by midnight, or 1 second until midnight on February 1st. Save a copy for yourself and be prepared to discuss this when your site visit happens. So if you have a finance person on staff or a board member who's actually submitting this information, make sure that your executive leadership has had a chance to actually review the information and is prepared to discuss it at the site visit, or that your financial person who has completed the information is available to participate in that site visit. Believe me, we will ask questions about it, and we've had quite a few organizations look a little stunned when we pulled that cultural data profile funder report out of our briefcases and actually had questions about it. So the criteria for this program, we divide the criteria into 2 categories. The largest is public value, which counts for 60% of your scoring. And we're very careful to say public value and not artistic excellence, because public value we see as a broader and more comprehensive measure of impact of your organization and its programming and our funding to support that. You can be an organization that is doing spectacular work in a community that really needs and values your services and not necessarily be doing world-class art. And that's okay, because public value is what we're looking to support. The public value breaks into 4 components, and these components will be measured based on your application narrative and our experience in the site visit and a review of additional supporting materials. First of all, the core programming and relevance to your mission. And this is where the excellence in programming, whether it's program design, implementation, or artistic excellence, this is the component where that excellence will be included as part of the scoring. We will look at your community engagement. We will look at your efforts and success in reaching out to diverse or underserved communities, such as ethnically and economically diverse, rural, elderly, veterans, and people with disabilities. This is not intended to be a comprehensive list of every kind of outreach you can be doing. This is intended as a list to help you think about the work that you're doing and whether or not you are doing work to engage with your community in that way. Certainly what that sort of outreach looks like varies quite a bit depending on what kind of program you're doing and where you are located. If you're an organization in a rural community, it's going to look quite different from an organization in a large metropolitan area. Finally, we look at the participation of Massachusetts artists, humanists, and scientists. Okay. Criteria part 2 is about organizational capacity and sustainability, and that's 40% of your score. We look at your financial health, we look at appropriate program staff to develop and implement programming, and we look at the ability of the administrative staff and/or governing board to manage the organization, and we look at your success in organizational planning and evaluation. I want to draw your attention to the point about administrative staff and/or governing board. We have a lot of organizations in our portfolio that only have 1 employed person or have no employed people at all and are entirely volunteer run. We have some organizations that are stellar examples of how to run a volunteer-led organization, organizations that have thought carefully about how administrative structure and leadership gets passed from one set of volunteers to another, how the workflow gets managed through the volunteer force. Being a volunteer-led organization is not in any way a hindrance to scoring well in this program. We have several volunteer organizations that are funded through the Gateway, and many of them funded in our portfolio. And we have really large organizations with lots and lots of staff that did not score particularly well. So this is not going to be a barrier to your participation in this program. I mentioned reclassification into the portfolio. This applies to organizations that have 2 successful Gateway applications out of any 3 Gateway application cycles. So you could have been funded in fiscal 16, maybe you don't get funded in fiscal 18, but you do get funded in fiscal 20. That gets you 2 out of 3. Your next application after that is the opportunity for you to move from the competitive gateway program and into the portfolio, where you will not have to reapply in the future. This will be based on one really important caveat, which is we have to have the funding capacity to add more organizations to the portfolio without decreasing the existing grants to the organizations that are already in the portfolio. So this relates back to the Mass Cultural Council's budget, our allocation from the state for our operations, and therefore our ability to grow the portfolio. We have a commitment to the organizations that we already fund. We're not going to continue to chop those grants into smaller and smaller grants to add more organizations to the process. So for us to add the organizations to the portfolio, we also have the funds to add to the portfolio to make that possible. Couple of points. There's no automatic renewal or preference given to grantees from previous cycles. And if you are a gateway grantee from the fiscal 16 application, you have to reapply in this application cycle just like every other organization. So it's the exact same application process with the application narrative and with the cultural data profile. So that's pretty much the summary for the Gateway program. Again, I'm going to answer your questions at the end of this process, or offline privately. You can call me or you can email me to contact me with questions about the program. My email is Sarah, that's S-A-R-A, sarah.glidden@art.state.ma.us, or you can call me 617-858-2710. I'm going to be sending out an email reminder after this is over to let everybody know that the recording has been posted online, and it will include my contact information. So our second program we're talking about today is our projects program, and a couple of points. First of all, you as an organization can apply to both the Gateway and the projects program, but you can only get one grant. So if you get funded by the Gateway program, we will take you out of the pool for the project grants. Applying to both programs will not hurt your chances in either program. So don't let that stop you from applying for projects if you're looking to cover all bases and want to keep your name in contention for funding. So our projects program, unlike the Gateway program, which is unrestricted operating support, the projects program is support for one specific project that your organization is carrying out. It's a $2,500 grant. Your organization may apply every year. So if you do a summer youth program every summer, you can apply every summer. You can get funded for that same program multiple times. Each application is a separate process and a separate panel reviewing you. Your applications for the projects program are due May 1st, 2018 at 11:59:59, 1 second till midnight. So what kind of organization can apply for a project grant? First of all, any Massachusetts recognized 501c3 organization. Note that I had not said fully cultural. Any 501c3 organization that does cultural program may apply to this grant program. Again, agencies and departments under federal, state, and local government agencies. So again, we have some municipally based programs, city libraries, local arts councils that are doing their own cultural programming that can apply for grant support for that specific project. For this program, we will accept applications from organizations that are not yet incorporated or are incorporated but do not yet have their 501c3 status, as long as they are working with a fiscal agent. The fiscal agent will be the organization that we actually establish a contract with, and the fiscal agent has the responsibility of safeguarding these funds and using them for the approved project. You cannot get funding through projects if you are a portfolio or a gateway grantee. And again, you can apply to both programs, but you'll only be funded by one. So for eligibility for the projects, we look at both the organization's eligibility to apply and then the project itself and whether or not it is eligible. To be an organization and to apply to this program, you have to have cash cultural expenditures of $10,000 in the past year, minimum of $10,000. Again, you have to have 2 years of cultural programming history. The project itself must have minimum cash expenditures of $5,000, and there is no maximum. Your budgeted income must match budgeted expenses, including this grant. This trips up some folks, so I just want to go into it for a second. If your project shows that you're losing money on it, our panel is going to question whether or not this is a well thought out project and whether or not your organization has the capacity to execute it. If your project budget shows a surplus or a profit, we're going to question why state funds should be used to provide a surplus for your organization, which you then spend in another location. We're questioning the need in that case. So if your organization shows either a loss or a surplus on project budget, it will seriously impact your scoring for this application and possibly your eligibility. Finally, the project and its expenses must take place between June 1st of 2018 and June 30th of 2019, a 13-month period. This is a change from previous years. It used to be that your project had to happen during our fiscal year, which is July 1st to June 30th. We realized this was causing real hardship for summer programs to present competitive applications to this program. So we've stretched it to a 13-month period. The project and its expenses that are being considered for the grant must take place within the 13-month period. This doesn't mean you can't be doing preparation, research, even some expenditures before that time period, but that the only part that will really be considered for this grant is what takes place during that 13-month period. It's your responsibility as the applicant to make sure that it is clear to our panel that that's what you're applying to. So what is a project? This can be a one-time activity, like I mentioned before, the possibility of that summer program. Maybe you're only doing it once and you're never going to do it again, or you're going to do it every summer. Either way, that's eligible to be an application. And it needs to be a distinct aspect of your organization's activities. And I've given a couple of examples here. A one-time event, a single production, an exhibition, or it can be a series of related events. Maybe it's a speakers series or a poetry reading series or art classes. One example that I've used is a theater organization that has decided to do outreach for folks with disabilities and has decided to implement ASL and audio descriptive services throughout their season. The project they could apply for would be hiring the interpreters, hiring the folks who would write the actual script for the interpreters, renting the equipment that makes the interpretation possible, and the marketing to the audiences that would benefit from the provision of those services. That could be a possible project, even though it's not one specific production. If you have questions about whether or not the project that you are looking at feels actually like a project, certainly contact me and we'll talk about that, and I will help you look at the project that you're planning and figure out whether or not it meets the eligibility requirements. What isn't eligible? So if the project you're applying for is the complete programmatic activity of your organization, that's really operating support. If you're looking to fund your summer concert series and the only thing that you do is a summer concert series, then you're talking about operating support. Now, maybe you could pick just one concert or a specific aspect that makes sense as a project, but if it's the complete programmatic activity of your organization, it's not going to be eligible. We don't fund fundraising, strategic planning, capacity building, or economic development activities. We don't fund programming outside of Massachusetts. Now, you can certainly have audience members or participants who come from outside of Massachusetts, but the programming itself has to happen in Massachusetts. We don't fund capital expenditures. If you're looking at capital expenditures such as roofs and septic systems and other building and grounds issues, you should take a look at our Cultural Facilities Fund. There's an application due in mid-January, so you might still be in time to consider that. This is organizational support, so we don't fund projects that are the work of one individual. We fund organizations that are doing projects. We will fund programs that are at schools but we will not fund projects that are exclusively for or by the students as part of their activities. If it's a co-curricular activity, if it's meant to be part of the education of students at a school, it is not going to be eligible for this program. And we do not fund re-granting, cash prizes, or scholarships. The criteria for the projects program divides into 3 major categories. We look at the quality of the project, the public value, and the organization's capacity to execute the project. All of these have questions that lead to the information that we want to gather from this. There's no site visit in the projects program, so your application is your opportunity to tell the story clearly and compellingly about what you're doing and to provide the information that helps our panelists make the assessment of your ability to do this project. Projects, how to apply? Well, it's just one online platform here. Again, it's the math.gosmart.org, and you will find the project's application. If you're an organization that has applied for local cultural council funding and you've been applying online for the last 2 years, this is a separate online platform, so it will have a separate application and password. The deadline is May 1st, 2018 at 11:59. That's going to be drilled into your heads if nothing else. 11:59 p.m., 1 second till midnight, and then this program shuts down. This is what it looks like online. The math.gosmart.org. Once you've logged in, you'll see select current programs and applications, and you will see all of the programs that the Mass Cultural Council is currently accepting applications for. You scroll down to the appropriate one, and then you can start the process. A few guidelines here. If your organization already has an account, don't start a new login and password. Your login and password are connected to the applications your organization has submitted. So if you start a new one, it is no longer connected to the history of your organization. If you know or suspect that your organization has a login and you can't find it, contact me. I will help you find it. I suggest strongly that you type the text into a word processing document and then save it as text and then copy and paste it back into the application. This will give you access to better counting for character limits. It will give you access to better spell check and grammar check. All of that will help your application be better. It also might help prevent strange characters that crop up when PDFs are generated out of this program. So given that, once you have finished putting in your text, generate a PDF before you submit it to us. Take a look at it, proofread it, see if your quotation marks or your bolding or italics have been converted into strange characters that don't actually convey what you want. This will give you a chance to edit them before you submit it. I encourage you to answer each question completely and specifically. Completely is really important. If we ask you as part of a question to provide a timeline and you leave out the timeline, you have left out a significant piece of information that our panelists are looking at to assess your application. Finally, save. This program does not automatically save your information when you move from one question to the next. So if you have not hit save, the work that you have input will be lost, and that will be awful. So please, at the completion of each question, completion of each page, click on the save before you go on to the next section. And one final thing, this is what the budget page looks like in the GoSmart application. This is the sample from this past year's application, and this is pretty much what it's going to look like for this next year. A couple of points. Please note at the top of the page, it says total project cash income must equal total project cash expenses. That's at the top of both the income and the expense page, and it's your responsibility to make sure that you've met that. This page includes the set categories that we have assumed you might have income in, but there are also some blank lines that you can use to add additional information. So if you have, let's say, funds from your cash reserves that you are using to support a particular project, you can add that as a line to this income budget. Note in the contributed income, there's a line for state government Enter $2,500 unless anticipating funds from other state agencies. So no matter what, when you're filling out this budget application section, you must put in $2,500 for this grant. If your budget balances and you've not put in this grant, we're assuming you've got the funds from other sources to pay for this project and you don't need this grant. If you put in more than $2,500, we're going to assume you are probably getting funding from local cultural councils or mass humanities or other states' resources. There is a question about finance in the application. You can reference in that section where you think you're getting other funds from. So that concludes my description of our Gateway and Projects programs. And now we're going to open it up for questions, and my colleague Michael here is going to take over our computer and see what questions you have created for us today. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you for listening, and best of luck to you on your applications. Okay, so first of all, I see a question about whether or not an organization has to have an audit. No, actually, you don't have to have an audit unless you're over $500,000, and we have many organizations smaller than that. You do have to have that $50,000 of cash expenses. In our current Gateway set of organizations of 17 organizations, our smallest organization was a $67,000 organization, and we have quite a few organizations under $500,000 that do not have an audit. That does not influence your competitiveness. Having strong financials and good financial literacy within your organization, that's what's going to influence your possibility of getting a grant.
Great, and this is Michael again. If you do have a question, feel free to type it right into the chat box as we can all see it when it pops up on the screen. So just know that we can all see that. So don't put anything too personal in there. If you have any questions, yeah, just type them all in and we'll answer them when they come in.
Possibly I have overwhelmed you with information and you now know so much about this program that you are ready to go and complete that application. Again, application isn't due until February 1st, so you have a fair amount of time still to complete this application. It is available online right now. I will continue to be available to you by phone or email to answer your questions. I am planning to take some vacation time around the holidays, so if you have questions before the holidays, that's great. So a completely cultural organization, that goes back to that definition of an organization whose primary mission is about access. We're going to click on the page here. There we have our fully cultural. So that's a nonprofit whose primary mission serves to promote access, excellence, diversity, or education in the arts, humanities, or interpretive sciences. Now, that doesn't mean that all of your activities have to fit that definition, but your primary mission should be around those activities. If your primary mission is that you're a social service organization, then we're going to question whether or not you actually fit this definition, and then we'll talk to you about the possibility of being a cultural affiliate. We've got an organization, well, congratulations, you're a new 501c3. Yes, if you're starting your programming in fiscal 18, you're going to be looking at 2020 to get your 2 years of programming. If you've been doing programming previously as an unincorporated organization, you can use that 2 years of history to apply for a project grant. So for projects, you don't have to be incorporated. But yes, looks like you're probably looking at 2020 before you look at a Gateway application. Glad that was helpful. Really glad to be here. That's our goal, to be helpful. Hope you'll continue to be helpful. It looks like I have answered your questions so completely that you have no more. I'm assuming that after you've had a chance to sit and think about some of this, you'll have some more questions. Again, feel free to contact me. I sent out the slides for this yesterday. I will send an email today just reminding everyone that this took place. This recording will be posted on our website. Thank you so much for joining us today. Best of luck to you in all of your activities and your application.
Thank you.